Welcome back, everybody. Now, wherever you look, you can't escape the fact that Britain is in the grip of a cost of living crisis. Is it going to turn us into bankrupt benefits Britain? Energy bills are soaring. Inflation is currently running at 5.5%, the highest for almost 30 years. And some places are now charging a scarcely believable £2 for a litre of petrol. The government has announced a £9 billion package to help families affected by rocketing gas and electricity prices. But many people say they're not doing enough. Many people say, I can't pay, I won't pay. At a time, though, when the UK's national debt is more than £2 trillion, can the government really afford to intervene? It's us paying for it at the end of the day. Well, to debate whether or not benefits need to be hiked to cope with this crisis, I'm joined now by Nick Buckley, who's a charity founder and author of Lessons in Courage, and also Christopher Snowdon, who's the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you very much, both. I'm just going to get stuck right into it, actually, with you, Nick. Do we need to hike benefits to make sure that these people who can't pay essentially don't lose their properties and stuff like that?
It's a very difficult question. The question should be, how did we get here in the first place? Another sticking plaster on benefits. What's that going to solve for the medium to long term? People are in trouble today. I get that. I speak to people every day.
Yeah, well, sorry to interrupt, but just quickly, I'll stick with you there, Nick. I mean, I'm worried that we're going to end up in a situation, we heard from members of the public there, I've got people now flooding in with their gas and electricity bills, and they are going through the roof. Loads of these people will not be able to pay that. So what happens? Do we not have to give them benefits to help?
Instead of automatically going to benefits, there's other things we can do. So if you look at your electricity bill, 25% of that is a green tax, and 5% of it is VAT. We can get rid of it, almost a third of your electricity bill, if the government stopped taking money out of your pocket. There's lots of things like this we can do. We don't want to be beggars. We don't want the government to give us things, because it's ours anyway. How about the government stop taking the money off us in the first place?
OK. Christopher Snowdon, now I'll throw over to you. Is our big green agenda going to turn us into benefits Britain?
The big green agenda, well, it's just another enormous cost. I mean, I think people are waking up to this cost of net zero. It's only been about 6 months since the climate conference up in Glasgow, and already I think people are starting to realise, even though we're not seeing anywhere near the full cost of it yet, they're starting to think that we've made a big mistake by not having secure energy in the United Kingdom. I totally agree what Nick's just said there. Yeah, cut the taxes. The huge amount of the cost of petrol is tax. We don't need to have VAT on people's fuel. We should get rid of these things. But let's not be naive about it. That's only different in kind to giving people benefits. It's still going to mean that the government has a shortfall. The government's had a shortfall for 20 years now. It's never run a surplus, keeps running a deficit. We've got nearly £2.5 trillion debt. The economy and the public finances are fundamentally in a very bad place. And the COVID crisis, followed by the cost of living crisis and the crisis in Ukraine, has really exacerbated that and brought it to a serious head. We're in big trouble now as a country.
Nick, do you care more about the economy or the environment?
Oh, I'll be honest. It's definitely the economy. I hardly care about the environment, because as a people, we make sure it's fine by itself. We are going down almost like a lunatic asylum route of this green agenda and this net zero. And almost everybody I know really don't care about it.
Christopher, same to you. Do you care more about the economy or the environment?
Well, when it comes down to it, the economy, and most people do when it comes down to it. Support for the net zero agenda is kind of broad but very shallow. As soon as people realise what it actually means to them personally, they're in favour of other people taking public transport, other people making sacrifices. But when it comes down to them personally, unless they're very affluent, they're not prepared to make that sacrifice. And I think that's always been a problem. It doesn't matter whether it's the most important thing in the world for Britain to go to net zero. It's not politically feasible. It never has been. I've been saying this for some time. You in a democracy, you cannot do it. And the dictatorships have no real interest in doing it. In fact, the very few countries outside Britain have any real interest in doing it. And it doesn't make any difference if we do it, if nobody else does.
Christopher, why do you think the world's politicians allowed themselves to get held to ransom by a dumpy Swedish teenager?
Well, they like the idea of it. And look, let's be fair here. You know, I mean, the science overwhelmingly does say that something needs to be done about this in a fairly short space of time. But I just fear it's the kind of, you know, if the problem is as big as we're being told, I don't see any solution to it in terms of cutting climate change emissions. Apart from anything else, the world's population is just rising so incredibly rapidly, and the world's population, generally speaking, is getting richer, is going to use more stuff and ultimately use more energy. So I just don't think it's possible. I think we have to try and adapt to it rather than stop it.
Nick, you obviously work at a charity, you founded a charity, of course, and are you concerned then that actually there might be the possibility of some kind of rebellion if everyone starts going skint?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I'm beginning to have a feeling like I did at the beginning of the 80s when Margaret Thatcher was trying to remold the economy. Some people say destroy the economy. The feeling I have at the moment is people have had enough. And once you start, and people could put up with a lot if they've still got money in the pocket, but everybody I know at the moment is scared. You know, we've had 2 years of being fed a diet of fear because of COVID. And now we're being told our energy is increasing, our food's increasing. And even though it's not even hit us really yet, we may think it has, but it hasn't. People are terrified. And if this carries on and the government doesn't get a grip, that's why I think the government will get a grip. I think taxes will come down. I think the government will spend money on this, even if we have to go into more debt, because they don't want social disturbances across the country, especially in our cities.
Christopher, do you think Boris Johnson's going to find it quite hard to justify to a single mum of three, say, who's struggling to put food on the table, why he filled up a lot of our fracking sites with concrete?
Quite possibly, and I hope somebody asks him that question. You know, that's another mistake, isn't it? No, this has not happened overnight. There have been external shocks that nobody could predict. The Russia-Ukraine war obviously is one of them. COVID was one of them. There's a number of factors that have led to this cost of living crisis that nobody could do much about. And I think the government did have to spend a lot of money and borrow a lot of money to deal with COVID. But there are a lot more important long-term problems, such as our failure to invest in nuclear, such as the moratorium on fracking, that have really damaged us. And this isn't some, you know, Damascene conversion on the part of people who are criticising the government now. People have been saying this for a very, very long time, this be taken offline without bringing anything in to replace it other than wind, which is nowhere near sufficient for our needs.
Yeah, Nick, I'll just throw over to you. We're going to wrap this up very shortly. But do you think that the big green agenda, I suppose, the net zero stuff, is the kind of thing that people can care about if they've got a sprawling estate in Hampstead and they've got a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape outside, maybe near the fire pit, and, you know, a lovely dog out there as well. But actually, your average Joe on the street just can't afford it, and these toffs don't get that.
Absolutely, they don't get it. And it's taken us decades to get here. And the reason why we're in this mess now, mainly is because of our 4 or 5 year political cycle. Our politicians only ever look 4 or 5 years ahead because they only want votes. So to make decisions now to affect our economy and affect our fuel prices will be 10, 15 years in the future before you get benefits from that. But they're not here then. So they don't want to give someone else the benefit, another politician, the benefit and the votes that will be generated 15 years from now. They only worry about 4 years from now. And that's the crux of all our problems, all our social problems. No longevity in any thinking.
Christopher, are you frack?
Yeah, I'll go with frack and absolutely agree with what Nick says there. That is the problem. It's a short-termism, and it's a short-termism that leads to this endlessly piling on debt. And so I think Nick's quite right that the government will end up buckling to this pressure, and it's, you know, there's plenty of genuine sob stories out there. People are, you know, really gonna struggle, as they did with COVID, as they have done for various things over the years. But because the public finances aren't sound, we're going to end up printing money. Effectively, we call it borrowing, but we're actually going to get the Bank of England to print the money. We're going to print money to deal with inflation. Anybody who knows their economic history knows that that is not a wise move. It's only going to make things worse in the long term. But as Nick says, politicians don't think in the long term.
Well, it's time for me to tell both of you to frack right off now, I'm afraid. Nick Buckley, thank you very much, charity founder and author of Lessons in Courage, and Christopher Snowdon as well, head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Time to